Hey everyone, welcome to the Love Your Life with Misty podcast. I am super excited to share with you guys a wonderful woman that I actually just got the chance to meet not long ago. So I have Sue Armato here with me, who's going to share some of her journey with you. The way that I met Sue was actually kind of just by chance. So if you know me, you know I'm part of an organization called 100 Plus Women Who Care in Southern Will County. Basically, it's a group of women who come together quarterly to nominate and vote on a 501c3 nonprofit that serves people in the Will County area. And we get to vote and decide who we're going to nominate and who wins, basically. And then we all donate $100 to that chosen charity. So this last meeting, the Cancer Support Center in Mokena was actually, well, I guess the whole organization was the recipient of our donation. And just by a whim, I started asking Sue about vision board workshops, and we got to talking about her own journey. And just on a whim, I was like, you know what, would you be open to being on a podcast about your journey? Because it was so amazing and it was so emotional, and she just tells it with such passion and feeling, and it's not something that people actually hear a whole lot about. And I feel like it would be doing the world a disservice to not let her journey and all the things that she did and all the things she rose from be heard. So Sue, I'm super excited that you agreed to come on and spend some time, with us and of your afternoon and different things. I know you're so super busy.
No, it's my pleasure. Thank you. Thank you.
You're so welcome. You're so welcome. So before we get into a little bit more about you and your journey and different things, tell me about your morning routine. What does that normally look like, or what did it look like this morning?
This morning, I got up and I took our 4 dogs out to go to the bathroom because they all sleep with me. And so got them out, took a shower, dried my hair. I do a 10-minute morning meditation. It's a kind of a starting your day with a positive framework. So I did that, and then went down and had my hard-boiled egg and jumped in the car and went to work.
That's so awesome. You have 4 dogs that sleep with you?
Yeah. They're all little, but they're awesome. So
okay, well, at least they're little. I have 2 big ones, and they're just too much. I'm like, you guys need to go downstairs on the couch.
Exactly. I know. Sometimes my husband leaves the bed to go on the chair in our room because it can be too crowded, but oh my God, I adore them. So
kick the husband out, let the dogs in. I totally get it.
It's all priorities, right?
Absolutely. So tell me a little bit about your background. I kind of left out that you were the executive director at the Cancer Support Center, but tell us a little bit of everything. What do you do there? What kind of brought you there? And then we'll kind of hop right into your background and what sort of really happened.
Yeah, sounds great. So my background is I am the executive director of the Cancer Support Center. I'm just starting my 6th year. And what that means is that I really work to advance our mission. And our mission is to make sure that anybody who has cancer is not walking on that journey alone, that they have somebody with them who can help them navigate the ups and downs and the difficulties, and also to celebrate the good things that happen along the way when you're dealing with a cancer journey. I have a BA and a master's from University of Chicago, and my whole life I've always been dedicated to trying to help those who are in need. So I've been an executive director for over 25 years now, during work in poverty issues and education issues and things like that. So, but this is kind of where I landed after my own 20-month struggle with cancer and the treatments I had, and kind of being rebuilt from all of that. So I like to say that being at the center, it makes sense out of all the nonsense I went through with my own cancer journey. So I'm just happy to be here to try to make people's lives a little easier and to help them stay kind of focused in a positive way and find that inner strength to fight, often like the fight of your life. So.
Absolutely. And, I know you had a really horrific 20 months, when we talked about it, and I literally, like, you guys don't know, but when Sue and I met, I think I literally cried the entire meeting. I'm like, this is so unprofessional of me, but I can't help it. Like, it was so moving, and it was just horrific, like what you had actually gone through. And I know it was hard for you to share, and I know kind of springing it on you to come on a podcast and be like, can you share it again? So
Right.
other people can learn from it. But would you tell us more about your journey and kind of everything that happened?
Yeah, absolutely. And, you know, part of why I think it's important to share these journeys is that often when you're diagnosed, you feel like you're all alone and no one else has ever gone through this. And you're really frightened of that, you know, the whole concept. So I sort of hope by sharing my story, and I'm going to be really, really open about it, because I also think we have to be able to be open about these things that we go through in order for others to know, again, that they can do it. Like they can do it. So for me, I was experiencing a lot of pain and unusual discharge. I had a gynecological cancer. I ended up having cervical cancer, but it took them about 3 months to figure out what was going on, because I was in really intense pain, and both kind of uterine pain as well as kind of rectal pain. And they couldn't figure out what was going on. And then one doctor, after like seeing multiple different types of doctors, one of the doctors sent me for a CT scan, and that showed a 7 centimeter by 6 centimeter tumor that was coming off of my cervix down. So normally you have your vagina, and usually cervical cancer grows up into the uterus. But for me, it was on the side and dropped down. And if we think about women's anatomy, there isn't much space there, because when you come down from the cervix, you have the vagina here and the rectum here. So my tumor was kind of laying in between them. And then if you think of stretching that, you know, 6 centimeters, that's why it was creating so much pain, and why it was kind of flipping back and forth during my different exams to get to the diagnosis. So when I was told I had that, it was, I was sitting in my car waiting for my daughter to finish her piano lesson, and the doctor, my primary care doctor, said, you have, it looks like you have cancer. We're going to have to go for a biopsy and figure out how extensive it is. And I think, like many of us, whenever we're given traumatic news, I couldn't hear anything. My world just stopped. It just stopped, and I didn't know what I was going to do or how I would manage this. I had I think she was 13 and 16-year-old at the times, 2 daughters, amazing daughters. And, you know, they're kind of at that time where they're supposed to pull away, you know, kind of maturing. And I knew this was going to be difficult for them. So I went to the oncologist. I had to have a biopsy done. And in the process of doing the biopsy, they ended up ripping open my rectum. So I had to be admitted into the hospital for that to heal up. And it was when I woke up from that biopsy that they said, you definitely have cervical cancer. We're going to have to, you know, really start moving on this quickly. I ended up going through 6 weeks of radiation. So that means 5 days a week I was going for radiation at Loyola Hospital. They did a great job. Radiation it can be really difficult on your body. For me, they made a cast that my lower half of my body could be in, and tattooed 2 spots on my abdomen, so that every day that I went in, they could line up the radiation machine properly. And there would be, each time the radiation machine went around my torso, it would send 37 different radiation points into my body. So really, by the end of 2 weeks of that, I had like burns on my skin. It was really sore. I had bad diarrhea. My bladder was not working as well. And I had 4 more weeks to go. So, and this isn't unique to me. Like, we all go through this when we have, like, especially torso radiation. I also had 6 weeks of chemotherapy. And that's, you know, a day of sitting in the hospital and having an IV. And it makes you very cold and metallic tasting. And for me, the day after chemo was okay, because they fill you with a lot of steroids and things, painkillers. But then the day after that, I could not even could not even get out of bed. I was really honestly afraid that I was dying from the chemotherapy. But, you know, they ended up giving me some other medicines to help navigate that. So I went through the 6 weeks chemo, 6 weeks radiation, and then a month later had a 12-hour surgery. And they wait a month because the radiation is still working for up to 4 weeks. So they trying to destroy the tumor. And also it had turned out that I had a number of lymph nodes that were also infected with cancer. So I then had my 12-hour surgery, which included a full externation, so a complete removal of all my female parts. It included, which also meant they took out most of my vagina, and I'm going to use the words that we to describe these things, because we have to be okay talking about this. And then I had to have an artificial vagina made, which a plastic surgeon came in and during that surgery to do. It was, he took part of my abdominal wall and then sewed up one side to create like a tube, and then reattach that to what was left of my, this much of a vagina. Also, they had kind of destroyed my rectum. So internally they had to sew that up. And then the only way to allow that to heal, that, incision to heal, was they had to give me a temporary ileostomy bag. And what that is they cut a hole in your abdomen and pull out part of your intestine and attach that to the surface of your abdomen, open that up, and then all your fecal matter gets put in a bag that you have to empty and clean and things, so that there's nothing going through the rest of your intestines so that they can heal. So I had that for 3 months. And of course, it was a pretty extensive surgery, which I was in the hospital for a little while and took a lot of slow movement to kind of recover from. But then when they reversed my ostomy bag, which was exciting, they took the bag off, they dropped the intestine back down. And then 2 weeks after that, I developed a fistula, which is when your intestine hits a hole in it and your body really miraculously builds almost like a little tunnel to the surface of your body to get the fecal matter out of your abdomen. Because if it stays in there, you're going to die or be really sick. And, so I ended up having a fistula form from where they took the ostomy off. And then over the next couple days, I developed 4 more fistulas. So I had 5 fistulas, 4 on my abdomen, and 1 was in my new vagina. So that was really overwhelming and scary. Not anything that we ever talked about having happen. It's really hard to have 4 bags hanging off of your abdomen, collecting fecal matter so you can still continue to do things. But for that, to try to fix that, I ended up going on 14 weeks of total peritoneal nutrition. They put a PICC line in here, and then you're on IV nutrition for 12 hours a day, carrying a bag, and it's being pumped in, and then there's no eating or no drinking. And that's to give my intestines full rest so that they could heal up. And that was, it was originally going to be 4 weeks, but like 1 healed, and then we did a couple more weeks and another 1 healed. So I was kind of like, let's do it as long as we need to get it done. I didn't really want to have yet another surgery, but I did end up having 1 more surgery because 1 didn't heal. And then in that process, it was, the doctor was able to reverse that and fix that. So all of that was happening really over a 20-month period, a lot of kind of ups and downs where like, we made it through, we didn't, we got the cancer, we did everything we need to do. And it was, the good news from the surgery is they couldn't see any cancer left. So that was great. But then we had all these problems with, everything else happening. And so it was a long journey for me, and really very hard for my family, my daughters, my husband, my mom, my siblings. Like it's very hard on everybody. So that was kind of my long story, and I hope I didn't go on too much.
Oh my gosh. No, absolutely not. The whole story is actually what needed to be shared. And that was actually going to be kind of where I was going with next is, you're so vulnerable when and so courageous really too, when you are sharing and you're really you're using those words that people don't necessarily use because they're taboo and people don't want to talk about vaginal cancers. They don't want to talk about rectums. Like nobody has a rectum that we don't talk about it. So, when it comes to those things, like what would you really like from someone who has been on that journey, maybe talking to somebody who thinks they might have something wrong or knows somebody who might have something wrong? Like what would you kind of guide them to help them be more vulnerable with their journey and talking about these things? Like what would you want to share with them?
Yeah, it is really true that it's people are not comfortable talking about these things. And I find it really, really interesting that we are so afraid about talking about our sex parts as well as just natural digestive things. But I can say my one brother who was very, he's great, but anytime I would say the word, my vagina, he'd be like, stop. I can't handle that. And I would just look at him and say, okay, but you have a daughter and you have a wife, like, so it's okay to say that word. But I think that the first and foremost, you have to be vulnerable and open with the people that you really trust. I think that's the first level. So, and, saying to your spouse or your partner, be able to like use those words and sort of signal to that person that it's okay to use those words. And then, even with my mom, I had to be like, it's okay, Mom, to say those words. Like, it is what it is, like, right. And how can we possibly work together to like win this fight if we're afraid of using words? And for me, a lot of it was, picking safe people initially to tell what was happening, and then giving them permission to be like, no, really, I'm okay with you talking about this or using these words with me. And along the way, you realize who isn't going to be comfortable with them, and with being that open. And then, not to be vulnerable with people. And now where I'm at now, I'm kind of like, hey, like, this is part of my story. It doesn't define me as a person, because there's a lot of things that define me. But part of Sue Armato's story is, I had cervical cancer and I fought a fight and I survived, and I'm okay sharing that story.
Yeah. And it's something that you said, like, needs to be talked about. People need to know, because, for those people who are feeling like there might be something wrong or things that need to get checked out, what kind of encouragement would you give them if they're sort of too embarrassed to make that appointment to go even get the things checked out? Because I know you said in your story that you went to multiple doctors because you knew something wasn't right.
I think that's the key. You have to listen to yourself. I think there's that sixth sense that we all have that is nagging at us that there's something wrong, and we have to listen, and we have to be willing to, even if we don't know, even if you just go to the doctor and say, I don't know what's wrong, but something's not feeling right, and I'm having this symptom and that symptom, like, start it gently, but you have to listen to that voice and keep pushing, because there were other things along the way. It'd be like, oh, you have an anal fissure, that's the problem, so do this and this. Or, oh, you have C. diff, that's the problem, do this and this. And I would do this and that for a little bit, but then I was still right where I was still having all these things. And so I had to keep going back and saying, well, no, I don't think we fixed it. Like, maybe those were issues, but there's still something wrong. And I think believing in that inner voice and listening to it. And if you're not strong enough to act on it, find that one person. Like, we usually all have a somebody, and turn to that and just ask, can you help me with this? Because sometimes people aren't brave enough to do it themselves, but need an advocate to go with them to the doctor, and be the person who's like, well, she's having this and this and this. And so I think that can be another way to kind of manage that. But I think as much as we can be afraid of these things, we also have to think about that if we don't take care of them and if we don't listen, it's only going to get worse. The longer we wait on anything we know is wrong, the longer we wait, the worse it's going to be for us. So I know for me, I mean, I would talk to a couple of my girlfriends. They're like, oh, it's just perimenopausal, it's just that. I'm like, yeah, but I've never heard anybody else talk about like these weird things. So it was that nagging voice in my head as I was trying to get like the symptoms. I was getting feedback from people like, oh, it's okay, it'll be okay, like it's nothing. But then there was that nagging voice in my head like, no, I think it's more than that. So I would just really encourage people to listen to that voice and lean on whatever strengths you have to move forward. If you're a prayerful person, like, pray for the strength to go to the doctor. Or, if you know you're kind of shy and need a buddy, like, grab your buddy and go, but really, really listen.
Yeah. And I think it's so important, is just, listening to your own intuition, like you were saying, is your body is your own inner guidance system. And sometimes we let all these other things, pull us and push us into different things that we know isn't right. But I've heard so many stories of people who just persistently was like, there's something wrong, and they go to doctor, until somebody found whatever was happening, you know? So I think that's absolutely amazing advice. And so for people who are maybe just starting their cancer journey, or newly diagnosed, or anything, like from your journey, what would you like people to know about cancer patients, like about their needs, kind of what goes on in their mind, like especially for caregivers, how to best care for them, or friends, family, how to kind of relate to them, just like I said, from your own personal experience and your own journey?
Sure. And I think it's pretty basic. I think a lot of times when someone's been diagnosed with cancer, it causes us to think of our own mortality. So people who loved me were thinking about their own mortality when they heard about my cancer, or they'd immediately think about, oh, she's going to die. And so it makes everybody like on eggshells, and people are like afraid to say anything or ask anything. And I think the absolute best thing you can do is to be open, and to allow yourself to be vulnerable by saying to the cancer patient, hey, how are you doing? I mean, like, really, how are you doing? Like, what can I do to help you? And because I think for a lot of people in my life, it was that, like, they wanted to do something but didn't know what to do. And sometimes it would come back on me like, oh, well, you know, what do you want me to do? I'm happy to do anything. And for the cancer patient, it is so overwhelming when you get diagnosed and you're being thrown into these treatments, and they make you feel poorly, and your brain is foggy. There's this thing called chemo brain, which is totally true, where you can't recall even basic things, and you're just feeling like, you know, it's kind of like you're on, you know, a double dose of antihistamines or something. And so a lot of times people would say to me, well, what can I do to help? What can I do to help? And in some ways, saying that is putting responsibility then on the person who's sick to come up with the solution. And I think we all know how to take care of people, right? Like, we all know, like, that if you know someone's sick, like, you can send them a card, or you can text them thinking of you. You know, you can make a meal. You can, you know, call and say, hey, do you want me to take your daughters to see a movie? Because I'm sure it's stressful in the house. Or, you got 4 dogs. How about if I come and take the dogs for a walk? I would encourage people who have a loved one, whether it's a friend or a family member who has cancer, to reach out and do something. It can be honestly as small as like a text every week. Just say, every week I'm going to text this person, I'm thinking about them, because that makes a huge difference for the person who's sick. The reality, my one daughter, who was 16 at the time, and this was in the middle of my treatments, she said, Mom, I just feel so helpless. Like, I can't do anything I can't take the pain away. I can't make you feel better. Like, I'm a kid, and like, you're an adult, and like, my options are limited. I feel so helpless. It was just like, she was paralyzed with her helplessness. And I was so grateful she said that to me, because then we could talk about like simple things she could do to help me. And one of the things that was best that she could do was to come home from school and tell me about her day, and tell me stories about what happened, because even though I'm fighting, like, I'm still her mom, right? I still want to hear about her day. So don't be afraid to come and tell me that. Like, keeping me connected to my regular world is super important. And I think sometimes we think we have to do these grand gestures, and we don't. It's often just put a card in the mail, you know, just let the person know you're thinking about them. My aunt sent from Wisconsin a prayer shawl that her church group made for me. Like, just put it in the mail and sent it to me. And I had friends who had, obviously, you know, dropping off meals is a very popular and wonderful, wonderful thing to do. So there's just, I just think that the best thing that a caregiver, someone who loves you and cares about you, can do is just pick an action and do it. You know, like, you can't do anything wrong. There's nothing, bringing a plant over, you know, and it means so much. There were a number of days where I literally would wake up and say, I don't know if I have the strength to do this today. I don't know if I can go for 6 hours of chemotherapy and radiation today. But I was lucky, friends sent me cards, and I put them up on my bedroom wall. I would look at that wall of cards, and I would say, today I don't have the energy, but I will get the energy from all those people who care about me today. And that would motivate me. And really it became a source of I could feel it. I could literally feel the energy of the good wishes and the texts and the phone calls and the cards. It made a difference, a huge difference. So just do something that simple. You can't solve it for the person. Don't even try, and don't feel bad that you can't, but you can bring hope, and you can share love and send that powerful energy that is out there in the universe. You can send it to that person's way.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I'm glad that you actually mentioned kind of sending the energy and different things, because I know when we had talked, you had already been doing some holistic modalities and different things before you even knew anything about anything. Will you share that? Like, kind of what was your inspiration for even picking those things up, and how they sort of helped you through your treatments and different things, those days when it was really tough? What was happening?
Yeah, I think for me, it's funny that a lot of times I think our minds have coping skills, but we don't always listen to them. So I can remember going in for radiation the first time, and I'm a little claustrophobic, hate elevators. But when you go for radiation, you're in a room, and it's obviously there's radiation in there, so they lock it down, and you're like, I was noticing the door was like this thick when they closed it, and I was starting to feel like, oh, can I do this for 27 minutes? Like, can I lay here and not move a muscle, and I could feel like my breathing getting shallower and things like that. And I'm like, okay, you can do this. Like, I started talking myself off the ledge. You can do this. Okay, you can do this. All right, you can do this. And then I don't even know how it happened, but I started saying the B words. A lot of times people say, do you use your I am statements? I use the B word. So I was like, okay, so you have to be brave. Okay, be brave. Now you have to be brave. You have to be positive, and be faithful, be faithful. So I started saying those things over and over to myself: be brave, be positive, be faithful, be brave, be positive, be faithful. It became like my mantra throughout the whole journey, that anytime I felt that well of anxiety coming up, that I would start to say that over and over, and I would say it like quietly out loud, so my ears could hear it as well as my mouth speaking it. And sort of that, that's one of those modalities of kind of repeating a mantra that can help you be more positive. I didn't think, oh, this is why you're going to do it, but it worked. And I, in that moment on radiation table, I would say those things until my anxiety calmed down. And it reminded me, like, that mantra reminded me of my core values and what I was going to do right in that moment. So that was one of the things I did. One of the other things I did was I would listen to the same George Winston CD at nighttime. A lot of times, many cancer patients can't sleep well at night for different, you're not feeling well, you're in pain, anxiety, maybe you're feeling really, sad. But I found that if I would play the same George Winston CD over and over, I would listen to the different instruments. I would pick, like, okay, right now you're going to listen for the clarinet. And I would just listen to that music over and over and get lost in the music, so that I was really, really doing music therapy, because I was incorporating the music, and instead of focusing internally, I was focusing externally on, something that in that music is calming for me. I found that I was doing a lot of coloring, and this was before those coloring books are popular, but I pulled out the Little Mermaid coloring books for my girls, and I would just be coloring different ways when I was feeling nervous. And that's art therapy, so it was, I'm using meditative things, I'm using different, and I didn't know about the Cancer Support Center there. I didn't have that connection. And it's interesting that a number of the tools that I was using that were just, my head was just saying, do this, that I knew a little bit about some of those things. My mom's a Reiki master, and I would have bad anxiety the night before chemo, because I had that terrible first chemo. and I'd have to like shake my hands out because there would be so much anxiety in my hands. So I had my mom come over and do Reiki, and that really took the edge off. So, I was lucky that she was in my life and had learned that previously and could come and can help me with that. But we do Reiki at the center. I mean, so it's funny that so many of the things that I used, and just kind of natural. And another thing is I always went for walks. I would always, even if it was just to the corner and back, because I wasn't feeling well, I knew it was important to stay moving. And and we do a lot of movement work here at the center. So I think that, but I think when you can implore those things, but a lot of it is you have to have the framework that I want to beat this. Like I'm in the fight. Like you have to say, I'm not just going to lay down and be a victim. I'm not going to just surrender. I'm going to fight, and I'm going to do whatever I need to do to get through this. And I think that's the decision that each survivor has to make, like along the way, right? Like at one point you decide, am I going to feel sorry for myself? Because you absolutely have every right to feel sorry for yourself, because having cancer sucks. It just does. And, but at the same time, you can either be lost in that negative downward spiral, or you can say, you know what, I'm just going to do everything I can do. Whatever I can control, I'm going to control it. And I'm going to just do the absolute best I can, and fight, because that's what's important to me. And that's really sort of kind of early on, that was the decision I made. Not to say I didn't have bad days along the way, because we all do, right? We all can be fighting really well and just wake up one day and be like, ugh, like I talked about how I would wake up and I just can't do it today. But again, if you're predetermining your mindset to be, at the end, I'm going to fight for this, I think it helps you move more quickly out of that negative space.
Absolutely. And I was actually thinking as you were talking about it, it's not even, you don't even really need cancer to really like apply all those things, but also, and it's so sad to even say, but a lot of people are dealing with some type of disease now, whether it's cancer or heart disease or, a thyroid condition or whatever, that can really just make them feel crappy. And, having that mindset of, no, you know what, I'm not going to feel crappy. Like this is something is just something that I have to deal with right now. And I have to figure out different ways around it and different ways to help my body heal itself, work on the things that I can control and go from there. So I'm really, really, really glad that you actually said that. And I know you mentioned a little bit about the Cancer Support Center and the different services that they offer. But, for people who maybe have had cancer for a while or even don't and know somebody who does, what are some of the things that are available to people with cancer, people who are survivors, people who are caregivers? Because I think there's so many people who it affects, but I feel like services like Cancer Support Center in different places, they don't even know sometimes that it exists and what's available to them.
Yeah, absolutely. And I didn't even really know that it existed until, after I was through with my journey, and I realized that a place like this exists. But there are these cancer wellness centers, and like located all over the nation. And really with a focus of cancer wellness centers is trying to help people access tools. I always think of it as we all have our toolkits, right, that we go through life with. And whenever you're thrown a curveball, like you're talking about, like some difficulty, some hardship, especially that we weren't anticipating, we open our toolkit, and sometimes we don't have the tools we need because we haven't been on that part of our journey yet. So a place like the center will provide tools such as, counseling, being able to talking through some of your feelings and feeling overwhelmed, because sometimes you need a little tune up in order to sort of have that more positive, like, focus along the journey. There's support groups. Support groups are great because as much as everyone in my life loved me and was taking care of me, no one else really knew what it meant to be going through chemotherapy or radiation. And quite honestly, I didn't want to tell everybody how awful I felt. They already felt bad enough for me. Like, I didn't want to throw all that on them. So having a group of people or a couple people who are on a similar journey as you, and whatever your hardship is, it really can lighten the load, and you can share ideas of how to kind of beat it together or overcome those difficult days. So I think support groups are super good. We do a lot around fitness, gentle fitness, because movement, there's a lot of research that shows that even just 2 minutes of fitness, 2 minutes of activity, if you're kind of in a rut and you just get up and do 2 minutes of running in place or 2 minutes of jumping jacks, it literally resets your brain and how it's thinking. And so, in teaching people those things, fitness is really good for healing. Our body needs good blood flow to heal better and to think better. So that fitness piece is something we do through yoga, different types of yoga and gentle movement, gentle Zumba, things like that. Nutrition is key. What we put in our bodies, it's our fuel. So there's a lot of research, again, where we know that if we're eating more plant-based diets, more less chemically altered things, that it's more what our cells need to regrow. And so we try to help teach people, how can you gently incorporate more of the plant-based foods? There's certain spices that have healing properties, like for cancer, turmeric's a really big one, just one example. So we try to help teach people those things as well through our nutrition programs. We have nutrition counselors too, who can help with that. And then another piece of what we do is around really body image. It's really important that when you look in the mirror, that the person looking back at you, that you recognize that person. So I think of women. I was lucky, I didn't lose all my hair when I went through chemotherapy. But a lot of people do. And so like at our center, we give free wigs to people. And the idea with that is that, when you see yourself with a wig on, it kind of looks like you. We have makeup classes. It's called Look Good, Feel Better. A lot of times when you're sick with cancer and other illnesses, but you'll get like a gray or kind of a jaundiced look to your skin. And you just look at yourself and you feel kind of like you don't look very well. So learning how to apply makeup with that skin tone is a way of helping you kind of see yourself, see that person, looking back at you. Women lose their eyebrows, their eyelashes. Like, how do you apply makeup so it looks like you still have that? So this idea of body image, and I can say, when I was going through radiation, every day I went to the hospital, I always got up. I always not that I'm super fancy with my hair, but I would, take a shower. I'd blow dry my hair. I'd wear a nice outfit, not fancy, but I didn't put my, my scrubs on to go, or my, jogging pants. Not that there's anything wrong with that, but for me, I wanted, when I would be walking through the hospital, and, you catch a glimpse of yourself in a window, right? Your reflection. I wanted to sort of recognize that person, and not like be like, oh, woe is me, but I was sort of putting out on the outside that, I'm still me. I'm still Sue Armato, the woman, the wife, the daughter, the mother, the sister, and yeah, one little bit of me is Sue Armato, the cancer patient right now, but I'm not going to surrender all those other roles that I have, or identities I have. So anyway, the center offers all of those things, and everything we offer, and all centers are like this, they're all offered free of charge. And we can literally take people, I see it every day, where people walk in and they are about to surrender and give up. I mean, we've had people who are planning on ending their lives because of where they're at with their diagnosis. And by coming to the center and accessing some of our resources and getting the tools, and the tools are all about finding that inner strength, that inner calm that is always in us, but sometimes gets overshadowed by fear. By doing that, we've been able to turn people around where they're living, happily and productively. And many people say the highest quality of life they've ever had is now, because they're actually tending to those good parts of themselves that they hadn't really focused on before. So
that's awesome. It's such a great opportunity for someone who, like you said, is at like their wit's end. They're just so sad, so depressed, so blindsided by their diagnosis, or what their prognosis is really, because that's, the diagnosis is one thing, but, we tend to get kind of the worst of the worst sometimes with doctors, like this
Yeah.
is worst case scenario. And sometimes there leaves little room for hope. So it's a really amazing space that you guys get to provide that space for people, and being able to kind of be like, well, that's their opinion. And
Yeah.
here's some other things that you can do that actually can help partner with your body and different things.
Right. And I think it's good too for caregivers, right? Like the people who love that patient, we take care of them too, because it's very hard. I think sometimes it's harder on caregivers because caregivers so much want to alleviate the pain and are so afraid of what is happening and have no control. Like it's so limited what a caregiver can do that it can be so overwhelming. And you can feel so isolated in that role. Like I mentioned, my daughter, like how she felt. I didn't know at the time, but my husband was so afraid that on his drive home from work, he would stop at church and go and light a candle every day. I had no idea he was doing that, but he was like, my dad and my grandmother, I suppose, to have passed away. He's like, I would go in and say, you guys work some magic up there for your girl. And at the center, our centers, we really are here to help the caregivers also find like what is their role and what can they do and how can they enjoy what they can of the person they love who's going through this at the same time. Because it's a team, right? Like no one does these things on their own.
Yeah, absolutely. And you were another person that I talked to. Sorry, my perfect time. So it's the caregivers are another piece. So what are the other things that you offer at the center for caregivers?
Yeah, for caregivers, we do a lot. We have caregiver support groups, and obviously we have individual therapy for caregivers. We have also have a lot of things like special education programs where we'll bring in different people to help them understand kind of, what they can be doing. A lot of times the caregiver is the one who's all of a sudden having to take over all the responsibilities in the home. So we'll offer some kind of like financial classes if they're not used to taking care of those things. We also have, I didn't mention this earlier, we have therapeutic massage, cranial sacral massage, and the Reiki. And that's often, we have sound bath, we have sound bowls today here. And that's often for caregivers because a lot of it is giving these positive channels to rebalance the energy and to get positive energy, the negative energy out, the positive energy in for our caregivers. So we offer all of those things to our caregivers as well, because again, it's that whole thing like on the airplane, you got to put your oxygen mask on first, caregiver, and then put the oxygen mask on your loved one. And that is not how we are programmed. We're programmed to immediately like put ourselves on hold and take care of others. And I'm the same way. And it's all because we love each other, but we try to help the caregivers understand that you have to take care of you too. And there's amazing things that happen along the way then between the caregiver and the patient, the survivor, because we can help make that relationship more helpful. And some of the barriers that sometimes exist of like, oh, kind of where we started this conversation, like what does a caregiver do? Like there can be tension around that, but sort of working through that and finding that rhythm can just bring great comfort to both people.
And I love that so much because I feel like, when you and I had talked a lot about my mom and, being a caregiver for her and how much that would have been welcomed for people like my dad and my aunts and myself, and just giving that little reprieve to kind of like fill our cups up to be able to help her more. So I think that that's so important. And I was talking with someone else that caregivers are kind of so overlooked. It's kind of a group of people who don't necessarily get a whole lot of attention because the attention's all on helping the person with the cancer. So I think that's so amazing. And that's awesome that you guys do all those things and offer all those services. And it's definitely something that people can definitely look into. How would they get a hold of you or the center? What's the best way to do that if they wanted to kind of check more things out?
Yeah, our website is cancersupportcenter.org. It's a pretty easy one, cancersupportcenter.org. And you go there and it has all of our phone numbers. Anyone can always ask for me. We also on our website, the homepage on the bottom, you can send a message to us. So that's a good way to say, hey, I heard Sue's on the podcast, and I'd really like to learn more. And we can send welcome packets out, or we can, if someone schedule time for someone to come in. I think it's very courageous when people decide to come to the center, because when you come here, it's because you're hoping for something better. Like you want to improve where you are. And when you do that, you have to admit that you're struggling a little bit. And a lot of times we don't like to do that, right? Like we like to just plow through that part of like, I feel bad about this or that. So everybody who comes in here, we immediately, welcome. And you've been here, it's a very like nurturing space. It's not like a hospital, and you'll immediately find something. We have over 150 programs a week, everything from knit and crochet to, to individual therapy and everything in the middle. So maybe you're not ready to do therapy, but you just want to like kind of hang out with people who are in the same spot as you. Well, maybe you wanted to go to the knit class, or maybe you want to go to the cooking demo. So at the center, we have kind of options, everything from social time to, kind of intensive work, and everything in the middle, because we know that it's fluid, like how we as people manage our emotions and fears and anxiety. And it's a fluid process. So we want to be there along the way. And we also have many people, it's often a common thing for our participants, our survivors, it'll be a year after they've been cancer free, and now all of a sudden they're falling apart. And they're like, why am I falling apart? Like I've made it. I made it through this, and now I'm going to fall apart. Well, of course, because your mind couldn't handle the emotion and the fear and the worry. So it shut it off, locked it up. And now that you're not living in that physical moment of fear and treatment, your brain can process. So don't be surprised if that happens. And it happens for caregivers too, where caregivers have pushed through and done a great job, and now all of a sudden they're struggling. Last year, I can remember it was in December, and a woman called here, and she's like, my husband's been cancer free for 5 years, but I'm trying to put the Christmas tree up, and I am just falling apart. It's like all coming out. I don't know what is happening to me. I'm having like a breakdown. And it's like, no, you're just finally at a point in time where your brain feels like, your mind feels like it's okay for you to work through this and let some of this go. So I don't want people to think like there's something wrong with them, or if it's a year later or 5 years later or 10 years later. Whenever that is coming out, just come to us and let us help you find your way to releasing that and letting it go, so it isn't like a weight on you anymore.
I love that so much. So what actually brings you the most inner peace? Like, I know we talk about, what you do there at the center and helping bring the caregivers peace and the cancer survivors and the cancer, the people that are going through that. But for you, what brings you the most inner peace?
I think for me, it's something I've learned over time, that serving other people is really what brings me the most amount of joy. And I never quite realized that. But for me, knowing at the end of the day, there's always a magical moment that happens at the center for somebody. And being a part of that magic or witnessing that magic, it just makes me feel so grateful that I'm still here, grateful that I've chosen to be here, grateful that I'm not afraid to walk the walk with other people still. So I think for me, it's that sense of serving another person that brings me a lot of peace.
I love that. I love that so much. And as we're kind of wrapping things up, one question that I actually really love to ask everybody that comes on the podcast is, if you were able to, have something being taught in schools to the youth that isn't necessarily taught now, it doesn't have to be, in one specific area or another, what do you feel would be the most impactful for younger kids to learn?
I think that younger kids need to learn that each one of them is truly a beautiful person, and that they just need to believe in their inner beauty and their inner ability, and not listen to any of the other noise that goes on. It makes me sad to see the levels of anxiety that children have, or the levels of depression. And I think a lot of that comes from all of the negative messages that come to them all the time. And I think for a lot of our children, they don't even see like how precious they are. And I know it sounds kind of sappy, but I just think each one of them is just this amazing potential of goodness and life. And we can't let anything destroy that or crush that. And school is a big place where that can happen, right? Like if you're not a super smart kid, you feel bad about that. Or if you're not the prettiest kid, you feel bad about that. Or, you know, you don't have the cool clothes, you feel bad about that. And so I think that we need to be teaching our children to tend to their inner self, their inner person, first and foremost. And I think we would see much happier children if we did that.
Yeah, absolutely. And, you know, it's another thing that you were talking about, you know, maybe not necessarily even applying to children, but I think that happens, you know, in the workplace and different places too, where it's, you know, you're trying to vie for someone else's reward system and you end up overlooking all of your natural abilities and all your natural strengths and, you know, working on your weaknesses and all these different things. So I think that just what you said, kind of recognizing, hey, you're pretty freaking awesome is a pretty, yeah, it's a pretty amazing thing. Is there anything else before we wrap up that you would like to share? Anything that we missed or anything that's on your heart?
I'm just really grateful that you're doing this, because you are opening up a dialogue, a critically important dialogue that we need to have about, you know, taking care of each other and not living in fear and tending to the heart and spirit and all of these things. So I just want to thank you for like just doing this for everybody else and sharing this message, because I just think it's really critical. So thank you.
Oh my gosh, thank you so much for agreeing. Again, it's so courageous and so it's so amazing to have somebody be so vulnerable, especially talking about things, you know, cancers, which we don't necessarily talk about, or parts we don't necessarily talk about, and just being so open and laying it all out. It takes a great amount of bravery and vulnerability. And I appreciate you so much for spending your afternoon with me and giving me all kinds of fun stuff to share with everybody. And I'm excited to do that. So again, if anybody wants to reach out to Sue or to the Cancer Support Center, I will put all of their info in the description. That way you can take part in any of their classes if you're a cancer survivor, cancer patient, caregiver. Definitely utilize them. I've been in there. It's an amazing space. The people there are just so wonderful, and it was so welcoming. So I'm excited to get to connect you guys with that space. And if you are not in our area, definitely look into the place that's actually closest to you, because I'm sure there's probably plenty of places. Is there like a central website that someone could look at if they're not in the area, or would it just a Google?
I think they could do a Google search, but honestly, even if someone is not in so we serve all the Chicago Southland area, have a facility in Homewood and in Mokena. You just reach out to us wherever you are, and we will direct you to where you need to go if we can't help you. So we get requests like that all the time. So at the end of the day, our what brings us joy and what our mission is to make sure, like I said, that no one is walking this journey alone. And if we're not in the right geographic space, we can help you get to where you need to go. So you just reach out to us, let us know. And if anyone comes to Mokena or Homewood, be sure to stop in and say hi to me. I'd love to just give people a hug and welcome them to the center.
You guys are so awesome. You're so sweet.
Oh, thank you.
I love it so much. Thank you so much again, Sue. I appreciate you. And I hope I will be able to get to see you soon. And hope you guys are able to come and see Sue and the center, even just to say hi. Hopefully you don't have to go there for, you know, because you have cancer, you're a caregiver. You know, I would love to see a world where that's not even a thing anymore. But yeah, so thank you so much again, Sue. I appreciate you so much.
Thank you.
All right, we'll talk soon.
Sounds great. Bye-bye.
Okay, bye.